Will we avoid dystopia? So, let's see if we can get my clicker to work. Wonderful. The problem we have is that no speakers. Can you all hear? Amazing. So I'll start off again. We have a problem with this digital dystopia question. The problem is that everything looks so complicated, but in fact it's really simple. There's a whole lot of noise, and it confuses things. And sometimes the best way to break through the noise is to go back to when things were at their simplest and at their clearest. So let's go back in time. Before we deal with the problem, let's take a look at the origins, the pre-internet. I'm going to introduce you to someone called Paul Baran. This is Paul Baran. Now, back in the late 50s, early 60s, Paul Baran was dealing with a very tricky issue. The problem was that we had a highly centralized network in the United States and in the Soviet Union. And around about that time, in 1964, when he publishes this essential paper in the history of the internet, around about that time we also have the largest ever test of a thermonuclear detonation. So the question that Baran is dealing with, so this is 61, and then in 64, Baran publishes on distributed networking. The question he's dealing with is, how do we solve the problem that the Soviets will attack our central controlling node and we won't be able to communicate our counterattack because everything's so centralized? And what Baran said is, this system, which we are used to even today, this idea of command and control from the center outwards, does not work when you have that threat, that risk. And Baran, and these are his diagrams, but animated, he gave us this, the decentralized system. Now you can look at this diagram and you can see the slings and arrows of insults on social media. You can see pop-ups and makers, all sorts of things can be read into it. And it was Baran who gave us this vision. Baran was deeply thoughtful, and at the same time as giving us this vision, he was thinking about the society that computing would shape. So here is a paper from 1968 on the engineer's responsibility in protecting privacy. Now, Baran was worried about the records of people, including criminal records. And he said, if we can't figure out how to protect data about people, we are going to lose society as we know it. Then he talks about the responsibility of engineers. And in that discussion in his paper, he says there are some who will do anything for a buck. And he calls these engineers the whores of industry. Out of the lips of Paul Baran in 1968. He foresaw an awful lot. Now, another document in 1967, and here is where he is anticipating what we think of as the cloud. He foresaw that we would be sending our material elsewhere and we might not really have control over it. And he was worried about what the whores of industry would do in that situation. So the person who gave us the distributed network, even before the ARPANET, is the same person who starts to articulate some of these ideas that we now have, and we are lucky for them. And one of those ideas is privacy and regulation. Baran is very, very clear. Privacy is constantly coming up. And he also anticipates our current crisis in competition, our completely dysfunctional digital markets. What Baran says is, we need to innovate and we need to regulate. And if we don't do that, the computer system's not going to be very good and we will lose society. Now, 60 years later, we now know that Baran got it absolutely right. He really nailed it. And these papers you can find on the RAND Corporation's website. You can download them, they're free. I think it's rand.org. So 60 years later, sometimes someone tells you what you should do, it doesn't mean you do it. 60 years later, why can't we do it? What is it that is blocking us from regulating? Well, I'm going to give it to you in one word because it's actually quite simple again. I'm going to break through the noise. You're wondering, why can't we protect our children? Why can't we protect our politics? Why can't we protect national security? Why can't we make space in the market for innovators to scale? And the answer is Ireland. One word. One word. So let's take a look at the digital market today. I'm going to scroll through the top 100 companies by market cap, and anything that has a red line under it, that is a digital platform, which is based in Ireland. Now, in this list, I had also put in TikTok, which isn't a public company, but it's an estimate of its market cap. So you end up with this fabulous list. This list of companies who have put all of their eggs, the regulatory eggs, in Ireland's basket. And if you look in between the lines of this list, you'll see a Faustian pact. Why are they in Ireland? There are some good reasons, but there may be some bad reasons too. And that affects all of us. Very recently, a state organization reported to the government that our finances in Ireland were in a very precarious state. Only 3 companies accounted for more than half of all corporate tax taken in by the state. So Ireland is also putting all its eggs in one basket. And now there's another person who we have to factor in if we're thinking about dystopia. I just have to make a little admission. Both my counter and the organization's counter says that I have 13 hours left. So I think I've missaid it. So let's take a look at how Donald Trump is faring. He is entirely reliant on the continued well-being of these companies. You can look at these logos and you can think they are a sign of strength, and they certainly are. If you are going to go on a trip to China, you take these people with you. But it's also a sign of weakness. Trump is entirely reliant on their boom, their AI boom, continuing to sail. And every American voter who has a 401k pension is almost certainly reliant on them continuing to prosper. Now, that is shaky ground for anyone. It's a very nice digital bubble you have there. It would be a terrible shame if something were to happen to it. Now, here is how those players use Ireland as a backdoor to operate across the European Union with absolute impunity. They do it through Ireland, except for Amazon, which does it through Luxembourg. I'm going to play a clip. There's going to be audio. Hopefully you can hear it, but I'll just explain it first. You're going to hear 30 seconds of an Irish parliamentarian asking the chief regulator for all of those companies in a parliamentary session whether that person has ever completed an inquiry into Google. Not have you ever sanctioned Google, not have you ever said they were good or bad, have you ever completed any inquiry? So here's the clip.
Have you ever, aside from amicable resolutions, have you ever taken a single Article 60 final decision regarding Google since your establishment as an organisation?
So we have a number. We have, I think it's 14 or 15 large-scale inquiries completed. And
that doesn't sound like
we have
very
some
much.
Against Google which are pending.
Okay, so you haven't yet
completed
a final decision.
I'll just, while you ask your next question, I'll just have a look at the list here. Some
Okay.
of them might have predated me, Deputy.
Okay, please, yeah, if you can.
No,
get
I think the
clarity.
answer I'm just looking is no, we have not concluded an inquiry
Okay.
against Google.
Okay.
No, we have not completed an inquiry into Google. And she said, since you were established, which actually predates 95. If Ireland does not complete an inquiry into Google, no one else in Europe can take up a European-wide action against Google on data. And I just want to remind you what Google is. That court case between Meta and Sam Altman and others reveals some very interesting correspondence and some very interesting records. One of Musk's claims is that he had a conversation with Larry Page quite some years ago, in which Larry Page sided with the robots against humans, and Musk had to defend humans against Larry Page. This is what Google is, and it's what Google, where it comes from. So let's take a look at what Ireland has done. We have gone through the complete record, insofar as it's available, of all major decisions on cross-border issues. This is the record. Many, many zeros. Now, let's break this record down a little bit. Inside each record, inside each decision, there's a draft decision. Ireland proposes something first. So this is Ireland's initial proposal, and then it is overruled by its European counterparts, the European Data Protection Board. So in the entire period of the GDPR, we have had almost no decisions that make a substantial change to how these companies use data. There's been no impact. The GDPR may as well not have been written, insofar as it does not change how these companies use data. Now, you may say, well, what about the fines? So for context, let's look at the market cap before we look at the fines. This is global market cap. Here are the fines so far. And here is how much has been collected. We don't have law. We do not have law. This is a fantasy. The fines are meaningless. And then we have this remarkable situation where the Irish Data Protection Commission was supposed to engage with a complaint from Max Schrems and Noib about what Meta was doing with people's most intimate data. It refused to for years, and then it was overruled by the European Data Protection Board. All of the rest of Europe said, no, you must. And instead of raiding Meta the next day, or even writing to them nicely, Ireland sued the rest of Europe at the European Court of Justice, which then, less than a year later, dismissed the case because it was ridiculous. But Meta had almost a year's reprieve from even the beginning of an investigation. Now, this pattern, I'm laying out the facts to you, I'm suggesting this is sabotage. It's sabotage. Now let's take a look at how you sabotage. So, first, you may have seen the story that Ireland appointed a new data protection commissioner recently, at the end of last year, that this person was Meta's chief lobbyist in Ireland during the period that Frances Hagan complained about during Cambridge Analytica. She then went to another tech firm and then went to a consultancy that represents tech firms. So, we have hired a big tech lawyer to police big tech, someone who actually is not necessarily an expert on data, but is an expert on lobbying. In the process of hiring that person, who was involved? Well, we obtained the papers from the government's process to appoint this independent regulator, and we find that someone who works for big tech was on the panel of 4 who was interviewing her, and another person on the panel of 4 was from the state. And here is one of the documents that that panel had sitting on its desk as it interviewed people. Now, I want to go through a few things here. This is how you don't hire regulators. The first thing is you assess totally generic things that are not key things for a regulator. Are you good at managing relationships? Well, actually, you're going to have to upset some people. So you should score middle to low on this category. Every credible person who has applied through this process, from industry, from other regulators, from the European Commission, etc., did not get shortlisted. And if they did get shortlisted, there was fewer than 10 minutes, because it included self-development to discuss their expertise, and that part was led by that corporate lawyer. So we've got a problem. And remarkably, it is public knowledge that any senior person who leaves Meta will be offered a severance contract, which they will be very likely to take because it's a good one. but it includes a non-disparagement clause. And that is why Sarah Wynne Williams is not able to promote her book, Careless People. So we wrote to the government. We said, did you check if this person was subject to a non-disparagement clause? And the answer was, no. No, we didn't, but you could ask the Department of Justice. We wrote to the, I'll go back a step, we wrote to the Department of Justice and we said, what about non-disparagement clause checks, and does this person have stock? And they responded, they were a little bit irate, and they said they were satisfied with their process. But they did not answer the factual question. Now that is our new regulator. The previous regulator has since taken up a new job. Now, I'm going to show you the announcement on the website of the law firm. It's not just any law firm, though, because the person on this side of the screen is Ireland's former, until quite recently, chief regulator for all of these companies across Europe. And the person on the other side is the person she used to have to fight against in court. So she now works for him. And that means that actually she works for the law firm that has many cases on behalf of Meta against the regulator. So it's a revolving door problem, but actually the people who are in the room in the first place are the wrong ones too. Now, what are the stakes? What are the stakes of this issue? I'm going to pick two. There are many, but I'll just pick two. Every parent knows there is a problem. We are all worried about what happens online. And any parent who is at all technical is particularly worried about recommender algorithms. And they are right to be worried about recommender algorithms. Anyone who has watched the film Molly versus the Machine will know the story of Molly Russell. She's not alone. This is someone who took their life because recommender algorithms were pushing suicidal content at her when she was at her most vulnerable, and she took her life. Now, there will be more Mollys, and there are more Mollys. But there don't have to be. If the Irish enforced Article 8 and 9 of the GDPR against the platforms, which they could do very quickly, the recommender systems would be off by default. And if you're worried about the market, for any startups in the audience who are wondering, is there space for us to grow? I feel your pain. I've worked for several, I'm animating before I'm ready. I've worked for several startups in the US and in Europe, and always there's Microsoft, Google, Amazon above you, and you cannot get sunlight. You can't scale in the market easily because they completely dominate it. So what I'm showing you in this diagram, just to take you through it, is what happens when you buy a new Android phone. All of your activity on FAZ or Spiegel or whatever website or app you're on, that'll be hoovered up by Google's ad business, and it'll go into your common profile. You know, your email will be absorbed, your maps, etc. And it will all get bundled up together and mixed. And Google will then apply it for whatever reasons it wishes. Now, up until recently, the main reason was advertising. But that's not the only thing that they would be doing with your data. If there's going to be any hope of a European AI contender, we have to stop giant Chinese and US firms from dominating our market by breaking our law. And when I say breaking our law, many different legal regimes, but the neatest one is the GDPR. So a simple example. If we enforced purpose limitation, this would not be possible. And Google instead would look like this. You would be able to use whatever you want, but Google would not by default be able to use of your data whatever it wants for its business. So let me suggest two things. One is quite wonkish. Ireland is about to take over the presidency of the European Council. And the funny thing about Ireland is that it never had an empire and never has it been confident, except for certain moments involving the Eurovision, but that is now ancient history. In the 1950s, the government went on a house-building spree. They should do it again. They're not doing it. They went on a house-building spree. And they built very special houses. They were small, but they had electricity and they had running water. This was a big deal in Dublin. And these small houses had big families in them. But there was always one room, the biggest room, at the front of the house. And that room was the special room. The special room is where you keep whatever silver you have, whatever linen you have. And when the priest comes to visit the house, then you open the special room. There's dust everywhere, and you serve the priest tea. Now, Ireland's presidency is like us getting the special room ready. This is the moment when Ireland is most interested in looking like something that in this domain it is not, which is a good European. So at this moment, what you should all be doing is demanding that Ireland recuse itself from every digital file during its presidency. You cannot trust it to do this properly, and it can't trust itself. It is trapped in this Faustian pact. It cannot do the right thing. Some people would even want to. But remember, Ireland is so much more than a tax haven. It's a tax haven, but it is also the back door through which these firms, from the US primarily, but China as well, get into Europe's market and get into our kids' heads and get into our politics. So that's suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is to Ursula von der Leyen and also to Friedrich Merz. Neither of them is ready to confront Donald Trump. They also are not ready to confront tech. There is a political judgment, or you might say a lack of something important. They don't have the will. But the beauty is that Trump is so precarious. He's so vulnerable. Remember the 401k pensions? He has to see these people do well. Otherwise, MAGA is in big trouble. And the beauty of Ireland having this power and not having used it for a decade is that the facts are so clear and so mature that pressure can be brought. So what I'm going to suggest is that Ireland is a pivot. And I'm going to count. Maybe we'll all count, okay? We're just going to count. I'm going to see what happens if Germany, which is a little bit bigger than Ireland, puts behind-the-scenes political pressure on Ireland to affect Trump and to affect tech. It doesn't have to directly go against Trump and tech. It uses Ireland. And the same for Ursula von der Leyen. So we're going to do a 3, a 2, and a 1. Let's see what happens. Hey! Woo! Woo! And here's the trick. He thinks it was the Irish. But the Irish love golf, so we'll be okay. So, I wanted to cut through the noise. We've got a world of dystopia evolving in front of us. That's what our organization, in force at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, is designed to confront. That world of dystopia is actually simple. There are simple levers and simple causes. You need to cut through the noise. So this summary is going to be 2 points. We know, and Paul Baran knew from the 60s when he designed the thing, that regulation is essential for society and for innovation. They go together. So we know this. This is not something new. We just have to remember it. We have to pick up those tools and we have to confront the problem. But we don't have to be brave. There is a way to do this without bravery, and that is what a sensible politician would and should do. So the second point is you should all cast your minds back to the banking crisis, where the Germans got annoyed with the Irish because there was something not useful then, but there is something useful to do now. Ireland cannot fix this problem on its own. It needs to be forced. And it needs you to communicate to German politicians that now is the moment when Ireland is getting the good room ready. You need to do that. Thank you very much.